Testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All righty. How's everybody doing today, chat? Welcome to another HealthyGamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanojia. Oh, sounds like someone is doing some yard work outside. But just a reminder that everything we discuss on stream today is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. So if y'all have concerns or questions, please go see a licensed professional. Yeah. So I'm glad y'all like the new studio. We had some help putting it together, and the people who put it together are awesome. Really, really grateful for all of the people who support the work that we do. You don't hear any yard work. Wow, that must be this mic, dude. Like, this is legit. Yeah, that's fantastic. I've been told that I should speak right here, that the mic only picks up like a bulb. So, yeah, welcome everyone. So today, got a couple of updates. So if y'all have an unhealthy relationship with technology, our Discord is really focused throughout the month of February of helping people cut back on things like video games, YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, etc. So if y'all are concerned about that kind of stuff, there's some community stuff going on our Discord server to help people develop healthier relationships and get control of their technology use. So check out the Dopamine Detox channel for more info about this group. And, you know, these are people who are dedicated to developing healthy boundaries around technology use. So if that's interesting to you, by all means, join, participate, you know, enjoy yourselves. Couple of other things. So I'm playing Lost Ark. I don't know if y'all are playing. Are y'all playing Lost Ark? I'm level 37. The grind is real. It's been out for what? Lost Ark has been out for 5 days. Okay, so it looks like most people aren't. Is it pay to win? So I was confused about that, actually. So I was super confused because it seems like Korean version, pay to progress faster. I mean, so I'm planning on being a filthy casual when it comes to Lost Ark. It's like, you know, I have friends that, you know, pre-purchased and hit 50 within like 48 hours and, you know, are already doing like endgame content stuff, or I don't even know exactly what's there, but I'm just kind of playing around with my boomer reflexes. I don't know how well that's going to go because it seems like a very skill-based game. And so I'm not even sure, like there's this crystal and aura thing. Like, do I need that? I'm playing a Sork because I like magics. I tend to like spellcasting classes and supports. The thing is that the bard, so generally speaking, I play support classes in MMOs and like in Dota and stuff, I play like position 5. But, you know, like it's the sword, I don't know, the bard, I just don't like the mechanics or sounds or, yeah, I don't know. So here's the other question I have for y'all. Do y'all know, like, so for all this optional stuff, like cards and crafting, like, do you need that stuff? Do you need to do those things? Like, should I be doing those things or can I just play the game? Yeah, I was thinking about once I hit 50, power passing paladin. So I'm not quite sure, but it does seem like there's a ton of stuff to do in the game. Yeah, like Makoko seeds and stuff. There's just so much stuff. Bard course. I don't know. Anyway, so we'll figure this out. You know, I think it's like important to remember that it's okay to enjoy video games, right? We just want to make sure that we do all of the things that we're supposed to before we enjoy video games, right? So make sure you take care of yourself physically. Make sure you are cooking for yourself and, you know, taking care of your loved ones and doing what you need to do professionally. Showering, shaving, etc., grooming, hygiene, and then enjoy some games. Like, that's totally fine, right? Y'all want to dive in? What do y'all want to do? Chill for a little bit? Can't cook? Well, you know, You can level up cooking in a video game, or you can level up cooking in real life. Personally, I strongly prefer leveling up cooking in video games because it's so much easier and so much cheaper. No, but seriously, the good news about leveling up skills in real life is that they carry with you. They're like, they carry with you year after year, month after month. And there is some serious food buffs that you can get in real life. When you cook like a really delicious, healthy meal, like it's OP, dude. Check it out. All right, shall we dive in? So I've got some good stuff today. Really awesome posts. So let's take a look. Also, Elden Ring. So actually, can we run a quick poll before we dive into this? I'm curious. Does Dr. K get to take a few days off from streaming to play Elden Ring next week? Yes or no? What do y'all think? Can we get a poll? Poll? No? Let's see what people say. Stream it? Yeah, do y'all want me to stream gaming? Like, do y'all want that? Maybe we can get a poll that says stream it, days off. Everyone's going to say stream it. But I don't know. I need stuff. Okay, so let's see if y'all will let me do this stuff. Okay, my people. My people. I mean, if you guys want me to stream Elden Ring, I guess I could set that up. We'll try to figure it out. Thanks a lot for the gifted subs. Yeah, so, I don't know what message that sends. But let me just think about it. We'll think about it, okay? I definitely want to play the game. I'm definitely excited about the game. But I think it is important to, do the work here that we do, right? And especially once you guys see today's posts, hopefully you'll see that there's a lot of good stuff that people are coming up with, excellent questions. And that's really what we're here for, right? So the rest of Twitch, not the rest, but a lot of people on Twitch, there's a lot of gaming content out there. And I don't know that we bring a whole lot of value to the table in terms of gaming. And HG is really about bringing value to people, right? So it warms my heart that 91% of y'all are okay with me playing Elden Ring. But we'll still see. We may just really think a little bit about it and figure it out. Okay, let's dive into posts. Y'all ready? Let's do it. Okay. Oh. It's not quite cut off. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so let's take a look. So why do I, 19 male, get so triggered by people having a different opinion from me, and how do I fix it? At 14 years old, my dad left the family. I was raised by him to be one of those men who doesn't show any emotions, and I got pretty good at it. I don't know when, but at some point that year, I decided this sucked and started training myself to show more emotions. I was homeschooled up until 18, so I was very sheltered and pretty much got anything social from my family, their close friends, or the internet. During that time, I was very active on Twitter, joined a ton of fandoms, and was around people who believed in the same stuff and enjoyed the same things I did. One toxic thing about social media is everyone, quote, retweets stuff they disagree with and spreads it. Eventually, I started muting nearly every word that could possibly show me anything like racism, LGBT phobia, Islamophobia. Eventually, I started to mute stuff I like so I didn't have to see other people's opinions on it because anything bad would lead to a panic attack. I also had 30K blocked users. I decided to leave Twitter in 2021 because I didn't want to deal with a panic attack every week. Fast forward to 2022 and I'm a mess. Well, I've successfully interacted with other people and don't suffer from social anxiety, to my surprise. I still suffer from the same problem. Anyone who has a different opinion from me calls something I like bad can risk making me feel 24 times worse. While I no longer suffer from panic attacks for the opinion reason, and while IRL is not as bad as it was online, it's still a problem I deal with. Sometimes I get huge urges to look up triggering content or scroll through a sub that is the opposite of what I love, or look up bad reviews for shows I like, and I have no idea what the motive is. Sometimes I do it and make my mental health worse. I know I'm the problem here, and I'm not going to change everyone's mindset, nor do I want to, but I would like advice on dealing with this. Great post. So today, chat, what I'd like to talk to you all about is, generally speaking, the concept of like ego, identity, and like how to grow in a positive way with respect to these things. These are things that we've seen a lot of interest about in the last couple of months, even I guess years, like since the beginning of our community. But I think that as people sort of start to learn some of the basics about ego and identity, what we've sort of discovered is that there's more and more interest for learning like more about this stuff. So what I'd like to do today is kind of walk y'all through how can we understand this situation. And the key things that I'm going to point out are, so this is a person who gets very upset when people have differing opinions from them, right? So there's going to be some issues here that we're going to kind of dig into, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at those. So the first is, I want y'all to kind of, so we're going to be talking today about the ego, or the Sanskrit Ahamkara. And I like the Sanskrit definitions because remember that the Eastern perspective of the mind was developed through introspection. So these are yogis that are sitting, in a cave in the mountains, just with their eyes closed and observing their mind. Whereas the Western perspective of the mind is developed more objectively and externally. So like if we think about, major contributors to the Western models of the mind, they're people who made scientific observations. The key thing about scientific observations is that they're from the outside, right? So Sigmund Freud would listen to people speak, and using their words would approximate a model of the mind based on people's words. Now, the downside of this, I think, is very simple. There's upsides and downsides. The downside is that just think a little bit about the gap between your words and the functions of your mind, right? There's a pretty big gap there. Generally speaking, as we become trained listeners and things like that, we can try to shrink that gap. As people become more authentic, we can try to shrink that gap. But ultimately, I don't know how good words are as tools to understand internal processes. The upside of the Western method is that it's objective, right? So if I'm studying my own mind, I'm going to be subject to cognitive biases. Whereas in the objective model, like especially if you look at like cognitive behavioral therapy or like the work of Aaron Beck, these are people, or the behaviorists, right? They made like lots of observations. And so you can use the benefit of science, use the benefit of lots of subjects to come to a more objective answer. The reason that I'm going to talk about sort of the Eastern perspective today is because I find that the Eastern perspective is more relatable as an individual. So for example, if I say this is the Oedipal complex, and I can explain intellectually the Oedipal complex, and people can even say, oh yeah, like that on some level describes my experience. The challenge is that your experience of your mind from moment to moment is less likely to map on very easily to the Oedipal complex. It requires like a lot of work to bridge that gap. Whereas the Eastern perspective of the mind, the reason I like it is because it seems very accessible to people. Like this is a model of the mind that I've taught to like 10-year-olds and they sort of get it, okay? So let's just talk a little bit about the ego or the ahamkara. So the first thing that I want to point out is that generally speaking, when we have kind of toxic or negative influences, there are two ways that we can deal with them, okay? One is externally. So in this case, this person is blocking people, right? And this sort of makes sense. Like we can limit our environment. Oh, this camera, I'm really gonna have to move. Hold on a second. Move this up a little bit. Shrink it. Hold on a second, chat. I may get in trouble for doing this, but I feel like we have to. Okay, I don't know what the widget is, but okay, the widget will hang around there. We'll try to manage somehow. Okay, let's just keep going. So one way is to externally deal with the stimuli, right? So what we want to do is kind of like, we want to limit what enters our senses or indriyas. So this is why indriya is the Sanskrit word for sense organs. So this is why if you look at, let me just see if I can turn this other thing off too. So it looks like we have people following. Give me a second, chat. Sorry about this. 1 second. Sorry about this, chat. I need all of my... Okay, here we go. Okay, I don't know how to fix this. No. We don't want to remove that. I wonder if I can just make this... okay, whatever. I can't figure this out. Let me see if I can get some help. Okay. All right. Well, we'll figure this out later. Okay. So what we're going to do, can y'all hear me? Okay. Let's just keep going. So one way, just to recap, so the ego or the Ahamkara is the sense of identity. We're going to take sort of an Eastern perspective. And if we look at that post, we remember that there are toxic or negative influences. And the way that this person is dealing with those toxic or negative influences is largely through external sources. So they're blocking people on Twitter. And the yogis sort of understood this as well. This is why people will go to monasteries or ashrams for, like spiritual study, for example. This is why we like go to school, right? So we tend to control our external environment to facilitate a certain kind of action within the mind. So changing our environment can be very, very important. But there's another aspect here which can be internal, right? So if we think about, like, I don't know that you block 30,000 people on Twitter, but think a little bit about, anytime something external happens that's disruptive, anytime something is offensive to your sense organs or triggers some kind of negative emotion, the solution isn't necessarily to just block it, right? So there's some amount of like internal dealing with negative things. And that's what I'm going to call resilience. And so what tends to happen if we kind of think about, why do I call that resilience? It's like, what do we think of as resilience? Resilience is the ability to like tolerate and withstand like negative things, right? So someone who's resilient can deal with some amount of like punishment or toxicity or whatever. So what we're going to explore today is sort of this aspect here. And because it seems like this person has done a really good job of sort of externally controlling their environment. So what I want to kind of point out is that resilience is the way that we sort of tolerate what I'm going to call discordance. So if I believe thing A and someone believes thing B, resilience is sort of the ability to like tolerate this gap, right? So this is what resilience is. So if I think that I'm, a good person and someone is calling me a bad person, my ability to tolerate them saying that has something to do with my degree of resilience, right? So if my teacher says, oh, you're terrible at math, but deep down I know I'm good at math, like I'm resilient. I'm not going to let that affect me, or I won't let it affect me very much. So this kind of internal, this discordance between you and the outside world is like what I sort of think of as resilience. The other thing that we can talk about the other word that we can use here is confidence. And this is going to become important, especially as we start talking about ego, right? So if we think about someone who's confident, they can tolerate discordant opinions. So if I'm confident in my, let's say, atheistic beliefs, and there's someone I'm talking to who has very religious beliefs, I can sort of acknowledge that, like, yeah, I don't think you're correct. Like, I believe what I believe. You believe what you believe. Like, that's totally fine. I happen to think that you're wrong and that I'm correct. But like, I'm not going to get bent out of shape over it, right? It's not going to affect me like emotionally or powerfully. It's not going to send me into a panic attack. You can easily reverse the scenario, right? You can say as someone who's religious, there's someone who's atheistic. You may disagree with them, and that's totally fine. We're not saying one person is right or one person is wrong. What I'm talking about is internally, how confident you are and how resilient you are determines how much you can tolerate differing opinions or discordance between you and the outside world. So the other thing to understand is that the ego needs concordance, right? So we say that the confidence doesn't necessarily need concordance. You can tolerate people disagreeing. Another simple example is like, let's say you decide to break up with someone or someone decides to break up with you. And it's kind of like an amicable breakup because both of y'all decide, okay, this is like not the right relationship. Nothing against you personally. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person or you're a bad person. It's just not working out. So if you have two confident people in a relationship who sort of mutually kind of decide like, this is not the right fit, like they can walk away from that without getting emotional about it, without getting, I mean, there may be some emotions, which is totally fine, but not getting like their egos attacked, right? Oh, like, why are you doing this to me? Oh my God, I'm so pathetic. I'm sorry I've failed you. Oh my God, you're so pathetic. Like, why can't you be better? So that's like the action of ego, right? The confidence is like different from that. There's a whole video about confidence versus ego in Dr. K's guide, and I'm almost half assuming that people have sort of watched that. But if you are more interested in that, we go into more detail, but we'll kind of continue going now. So the ego needs concordance. Another good example of this is like if we think about someone who's egotistical, like they need praise, right? Because the thing about ego is that if we say that confidence and ego are at the opposite ends of a spectrum, right? And you can either move this way or this way. We can think about the egotistical person as someone who like needs reassurance from the outside world. That's why they're egotistical. That's why they'll advertise their successes, right? These are people who will be very, very vocal about their successes. They'll be vocal about how much money they make. They'll be vocal about the car they drive. They'll be vocal about how they're better than other people. They'll be really, really vocal. And why is that? It's because since you don't believe it about yourself, you have to convince other people, right? So you want something to be true. And like the more that you can convince other people, the better off you will feel about yourself because internally you don't really feel it yourself. So the ego, unlike the confidence or the lack of the Ahamkara, needs concordance, right? And what resilience is the capacity to tolerate discordance. And when we are not resilient or we sort of don't have that confidence within ourselves, sometimes the most effective solution we come up with is to block people, is to limit our external surroundings, right? I just can't tolerate this kind of thing because it makes me feel bad. I'm not quite sure why or how, but like, so I'm going to shut it off, which is okay. Like you can do that, right? That's like a healthy part of it. Like we said earlier, monks engage in this stuff, students engage in this stuff. It's not bad. It's just important to understand what your options are and actually use both of them. So the next thing to understand about kind of ego is that like, let's kind of go back to, let's actually take a quick tangent and talk about attachment theory for a second. So I know that this is sort of an Eastern perspective, but if y'all are interested in sort of the science behind some of this stuff, we can talk about attachment theory for a second. So how do we develop confidence, right? So this is the main question. Okay, Dr. K, you're saying that confidence is good, ego is bad. So like, how do we develop confidence? And this is where, thankfully, like scientific research, right? So this is Western psychology. You know, there are a lot of excellent researchers who sort of developed this idea called attachment theory. And attachment theory essentially is like, in my opinion, or I don't know if it's the best, but it's the scientific explanation for confidence that I personally like the most. So some people go through life and are confident. Other people go through life and are not confident, right? This is like a general state of their being. And sure, confidence can vary in terms of whether we're talking about Lost Ark or plumbing, right? But like generally speaking, some people are more outgoing, more confident. Some people are more concerned that the world is a dangerous place. And a simplistic way to kind of dig into that, attachment theory is very, very vast and deep and complex. I'm going to try to oversimplify here for a second. But what the researchers in attachment theory essentially discovered is that when we are emotionally mirrored early in childhood, we develop confidence. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what this means. So early on, when we're like 1 year old or 2 years old or 3 years old, what happens is like we don't understand the world, right? Like the world doesn't make sense. It's entirely new. So the way that we develop confidence, what people noticed is that when children are around adults that emotionally mirror them, those are the children that become confident. So when I like trip and fall and I hurt myself, I am feeling pain, right? I don't know exactly what that is because I'm a 1 year old. Like I don't understand the philosophy of pain. All I know is that it hurts. I'm kind of confused. Like I'm a kid. I don't understand stimuli yet, right? All I know is in a vague sense, it hurts. So then when people around me respond, right? So when my parents come and pick me up and they're like, oh, poor baby. And this is also interesting because it's conserved between cultures, but generally speaking, parental figures and other adults will have exaggerated emotional responses with children. So it's like if the child walks up to you and like shows you like, look, I have a pen. Like, are we like, oh, whatever, dude, why are you showing me that? That's not how adults respond, right? Well, how adults respond is like, oh my God, that's a white pen. Where did you find the white pen? So we have this exaggerated emotional response. Oh my God, did baby get hurt? Oh, my poor thing. Let me pick you up. Let me hold you. Oh, my poor darling, my poor precious, my child. Oh my God, are you okay? So we have these exaggerated emotional responses, right? So, and why is that? And that's because like actually what happens is when we have an exaggerated emotional response, it actually demonstrates to the child what they're feeling. So children will learn, oh, okay, like I'm feeling sad, and they'll see your facial expression and they'll see like, okay, that's sadness or that's support or like, so what happens is in the world, there's concordance between what the child experiences and how adults respond to them. And essentially what happens is when kids sort of have a lot of concordance between their internal experience and the rest of the world, then the world makes sense. There are rules to the game, right? So think about it this way. If I'm a kid and I get hurt, and then like instead of being supported, if my parents start yelling at me for crying, like what do I learn about the world? I learn that the world is like a confusing place, right? Where like if I get hurt, like I should be punished for getting hurt. That's the sort of lessons people take away. And so if the world is like confusing, and so what the attachment theory researchers sort of discovered is that when there's like variable emotional responses based on from caregivers. So a good example of this is like alcoholics. So I have an alcoholic parent. While they're sober, like they're going to be loving and caring, but while they're drunk, they're going to be like angry and yell at me and stuff like that. So then what happens is like I determine that the world is a confusing place where I don't know the rules. And if I don't know the rules, how can I move about the world with confidence? Right? So if you think about like how do kids get confidence, because they like learn how stuff works. Like how does a child develop confidence with walking? It's because like walking is the same every single time. Now imagine like trying to learn how to walk if like every other day or for a few hours a day when your parents are drunk, suddenly like gravity turns off, right? Like it would be so much harder to work. The rules of the game have changed. And once you don't understand the rules of the game, like it's hard to move about confidently in the world, okay? So this is kind of a quick aside to attachment theory, but the key thing is that concordance or emotional mirroring instills confidence. Okay? So even if we bounce to the post for a second, right? This is where like, remember, like when we were looking at the post, what we sort of saw was that, okay, dad left the family, raised, doesn't show any emotions, and I got pretty good at it, right? Homeschooled as well. So what we're sort of noticing is that like we're not really 100% sure, right? So we could ask more questions to this person about their upbringing, but they definitely appear to have some kind of setup that suggests like suboptimal emotional mirroring, right? Including an emotionally unavailable father who then after the age of 14 like left. So that's like kind of, it's unfortunate, right? But this is what happened. This is the truth of the world, is that sometimes that's how we grow up. So this is kind of a quick aside that sort of demonstrates that concordance and emotional mirroring instill confidence, okay? So now let's go back to this person's main question, which is like, why can't I tolerate disagreement? Right? That's kind of the core question here. And so generally speaking, I think the main reason for this is a lack of faith in yourself. Right? This kind of goes back to the ego point. But if I'm confident in myself, like I can tolerate people disagreeing with me. If I'm egotistical, like if I'm insecure about my appearance, I need lots and lots of compliments about my appearance, right? Whereas if I'm very secure in my appearance, like people could even be insulting and like I would generally speaking be okay with that, right? I mean, I'm not saying that you're impervious to it. So every time you get an insulting comment, like it's going to chip away at your confidence a little bit generally. But you know, your resilience, your capacity to tolerate negativity is going to be high if you're confident in yourself. And if you can't tolerate discordance with the outside world, it generally comes down to, like, I think a lack of faith in yourself. And so this is where once you have a lack of faith in yourself, or if you haven't developed this kind of attachment theory, emotional mirroring, confidence kind of stuff, you don't really know like who you are, you don't really understand that deep down you're a good person, then what tends to happen, like, so when we don't have an understanding of who we truly are, when this is a question mark, when we don't understand who we truly are, we tend to feel, this is the key part about Ahamkara, okay? When we don't understand who we truly are, when we lack confidence in ourselves, what we tend to do is fill in the gap with external things. Right? So this is going to be kind of a random aside. We'll go into this more detail later. But remember, in the yogic concept, we have a true self. There's a really easy version, the way to understand your true self. Just close your eyes for like 5 minutes and just experience whatever you experience. And this is where, like, it's kind of weird, but like what you're going to discover is it's like relatively neutral, right? There's not going to be like much gender to your experience. I mean, maybe you do have some physical sensations that denote some kind of gender, but generally speaking, throughout your day, like, the color of your skin is going to be irrelevant in terms of your experience. People may react to you differently, but if I'm like sitting outside in the sun, like, my ethnicity doesn't really matter that much. Sure, there may be like some element of sunburn depending on, how much melanin my skin cells have and things like that. But generally speaking, like, the color of my skin or the color of my hair or things like that won't matter in terms of like everyday experiences, right? So if I take a sip of tea, like the experience of tasting the tea doesn't matter whether I'm 15, 30, or 45, doesn't matter whether I'm a man or woman, it doesn't matter whether I have long hair or short hair. The experience of life is like independent, generally speaking, of identity. Oh, I'm talking about like an actual moment in time, right? And so this is where you can say, but what about things like racism and stuff like that? But yeah, but even then, so if I'm attacked by someone due to my race, my experience of that attack is actually independent of race, right? So if someone like, physically attacks me because of the color of my skin, my experience of that moment of physical pain is actually independent of the color of my skin. Is it being caused because of racism? Absolutely. So we're not saying that that's not important. What we're saying is that the actual experience of, let's say, getting, pushed to the ground is independent of any kind of identity. It sucks for all people, right? So this is what the yogis sort of discovered, is that there's this true self, which is actually described by neti neti. And what neti neti means is the Sanskrit phrase for not this, not this. So any attribute that you can define yourself with is not actually the true self. So, and then we have the false self, and this is the Ahamkara. This is the ego. And this is where we have all kinds of attributes, right? So I was valedictorian, top of my class, or I'm a failure. Whereas, like, at the end of the day, anyone, if you're just sitting in the sun or you're taking a bath, like whether you're a failure or a success, whether you're a billionaire or a pauper, like it sort of doesn't matter, right? The experience of water on your skin is stable. So what tends to happen is the less we understand this, and this is also where like confidence brings us closer to the true self. I think that's what it really is like confidence is like an understanding of our true self. The more we tend to fill in the gap with external things. And so then what happens is we begin to form an identity around beliefs. Okay? So like a good example of this is like, if you don't really know who you are, if you don't know who you are, you substitute who you are with things that you believe. So y'all may know like people who have identities that revolve around like a particular thing, like a cause or a political belief or some kind of like moralistic stance. So one of the things that terrifies me is how immoral people who believe in a good cause can be. And a good example of this is like what I would call the angry vegan. So I have nothing against veganism. Veganism is actually like probably very good for the environment. From a biomass perspective, it's fantastic. From a health perspective, it's really good. But sometimes you'll encounter someone who's like an angry vegan, right? And so like being a vegan is not just something that they do. It's not like they're just trying to like do something good for the environment and like it's a choice that I make. I'm cool with it. Like it'd be awesome if more people were vegan, but like you do you, I'm going to do me. That's sort of like a confident vegan. And then we have the angry vegans. And the angry vegans are like, they're like very, very hurt and offended and very aggressive. And if you try to like engage them in discussion, they're going to actually be like somewhat like toxic and judgmental and things like that. Veganism becomes a whole part of their identity, like who they are is vegan. It's not just a lifestyle choice, it's like a completely transformative way of life. And once again, nothing against vegans. I think it's fantastic if you decide to become a vegan, like you do you, and like good for you and probably good for the environment and good for your body. So fantastic. The next example of this is people who are very, very political, right? So like where politics is no longer just, a choice. It's like it becomes a core part of our identity. It becomes part of who we are. And so, the other thing that we sort of see with these people is once you start to have like, an Ahamkara or, ego develop around these core beliefs, that these have to be heavily advertised. Right? So most of like the calm, chill, confident vegans are not like super aggressive in advertising on social media. The people who like advertise on social media and are like being very, very, aggressive towards people are the ones that have to like advertise like how awesome of a vegan they are and are like very judgmental towards other people. So we can see once again that like the ego, which requires external support, relates to our sense of identity, and that sort of engages, like the more that people go down the egotistical route, the more vocal they become. Like you could vocally advocate for things without being egotistical, but that's also where like you can sort of notice the difference in terms of how they engage other people in discussion. Right? So if like someone engages, a confident vegan in discussion, like they're not going to make personally slanderous remarks, right? They're just going to be like, yeah, I disagree with you. Here are the reasons why. So it's kind of like a civilized discussion between an atheist and a religious person, or an uncivilized discussion between like diehard religious people and like diehard atheists, right? Those are very different things. And so, what we end up seeing with the ego is since you doubt, you have to demonstrate. Because you don't really know who you are. You're not really confident in yourself. And with the absence of those things, if you don't know you yourself are a good person, you have to work really, really hard to convince everyone else that you're a good person. And the way that you do that is by demonstrating very, very loudly, right? Because the more people you can convince that you are a good person, the more your insecurity will like feel kind of calmed down, because, like, oh, if like 1,000 people think I'm a good person, then I must be a good person. Because deep down within your own mind, you're not sure. You're not truly confident, right? So insecurity will sometimes manifest in this way with trying to be like aggressive with other people and like convincing people of things. So let's kind of go back to this person's situation, okay? So let's try to recap for a moment. So this is someone who gets triggered by the opinions of others. Okay? And what we kind of notice is that like anyone who has a different opinion from me or calls something I like bad can risk making me feel 24 times worse. So that's kind of really interesting, right? So when people disagree, I feel bad, which is kind of weird, right? So I want y'all to just think about that for a second. How does a disagreement become a judgment or personally emotional experience, right? Like, it's kind of strange, right? So like, it's kind of like, I like pepperoni pizza and someone else is like, I like pineapple pizza. And then like, I feel bad. Like, that's weird, right? So we could say like, depending on which camp you're in, you are an uncivilized barbarian for liking that. How dare you? But if we really kind of stop and think about it, there's something weird going on here. Like, why does someone feel personally bad based on an external disagreement or opinion that someone, like another human being, holds? And this is the kind of thing where, like, this is where ego comes in, right? So this is like where I would, I would ask, one question. So if you're in this kind of situation where you get personally, like, feel bad or feel attacked or need everyone around you to kind of agree with what you say, the key question to ask yourself is, if someone disagrees, what does that say about me? Right? Because this is the key. Y'all see this? Like, The key thing is that an external disagreement, which can be purely intellectual and totally fine, is somehow getting translated into a personal judgment or somehow getting translated into some sense of identity, right? And so for the people who say, what does that say about me? It says nothing about me. These are the people that are confident. But if you really pay attention, the people who have ahamkaras, have egos, don't really understand who they are, haven't been emotionally mirrored early on in life, haven't really discovered the true nature of self, they're going to be the ones that are like, it says something about me, right? It says that I am wrong. Like, it's kind of bizarre, but like you can sort of get the sense from this person's post that, sometimes I get huge urges to look up triggering content or scroll through a sub that is the opposite of what I love, or look up bad reviews for shows I like, and I have no idea what the motive is, right? Sometimes, like, I do it and make my mental health worse. It's because we'll kind of get to that in a second, but what we're sort of noticing is that there's like a huge internal component to this experience. It's about like being perceived in a particular way. And like, if I can find other people to confirm, if I look up the negative reviews, then it confirms what I believe about myself, which is that like, my opinions aren't good or worthwhile. The other place that you'll see this is after a breakup. If you're feeling really, really bad about yourself, right? What your mind will do is go and seek out stimuli to confirm what it believes about you. So if you're feeling terrible about yourself, what you're going to do is go look at pictures of your ex, and then you're going to see, like, if you see a single picture of your ex with someone else, right? You don't know if they're boyfriend, girlfriend. You don't know if it's like platonic. You're going to look at all of those pictures. And each of those pictures is going to be a punch to your gut, and you just can't help yourself. Because what your mind is looking for is concordance, right? That's what the mind craves. The mind wants to make sense of the world because now I can navigate it. And if I feel a particular way about myself and I go seek out confirmatory stimuli, then, okay, like at least I make sense, right? Because what the mind hates more than anything else is confusion. Even if I am a bad person, at least I can navigate my life as a bad person as long as I know I'm a bad person. So the mind values concordance over goodness, right? It wants certainty over positivity. That's really what it wants. It's more important for your mind to be consistent than it is for it to be correct. So there are a couple of other questions that you can ask yourself, which is like, how do I feel about myself? Right? And the last question is, am I a good person? So this is a yes or no question. So as you start to ask some of these questions, what you'll notice is like you're starting to understand, okay, where am I on this axis of like true self versus false self, right? Am I confident? Do I really know who I am? Because a lot of times when I have conversations with people who are sort of in this kind of scenario, I'm making a lot of assumptions here. But like, if this was someone that I was interviewing on stream, I'd ask them like, how do you feel about yourself? Do you think you're a good person? And like the answers that I usually get are like, I have no idea. Like how the hell are you supposed to even know whether you're a good person? Like, what does that even mean? Right? It's so foreign. It's like, I guess, and sometimes what they'll say is like external things. They'll like, people tell me I'm a good person, right? Like they'll say like, I'm not entirely sure. Like, I don't know. Like, so there's just a lot of confusion here where people don't really understand who they are. In the absence of understanding who you are, you fill it in with ego, right? You fill it in with external things because your mind needs some way to navigate the world. And if it doesn't have a good understanding of who you are internally, it's going to pick stuff from the outside and fill in that vacuum. So the next kind of question to ask is like, okay, so if you're in this situation, what do, Dr. K? So the first thing that I want to acknowledge is that if you're actually having panic attacks, right, that's absolutely a reason to go see a licensed mental health professional. Like, because I know it sounds like you figured out the source of your panic attacks is, through limiting Twitter. But if this is a tried and true panic attack, like, you may want to get that checked out, right? So if you're experiencing impairments or you're concerned about possible impairments, then you should absolutely go see a licensed professional. Okay? So you may want to, see a therapist. And if you're like, is it a true panic attack or not a true panic attack? I don't know. And that's like you're not supposed to know, right? That's the job of a therapist. So one of the things that, clinicians do is like they have to evaluate you. So another thing that I see is that a lot of people think like, okay, how do I know if I need help? Like, how do I know if it's bad enough to need treatment? Whereas that's the wrong question, because you're not the one who's going to make that evaluation, right? It's actually like half the job of a clinician is diagnosis. So if you're concerned at all, or you're like, it's a question mark for you, then you should absolutely go see someone. Next thing to think a little bit about, just a reminder, right, is we talked about attachment theory. And even if you don't have a panic disorder, right, which it's important for the therapist to sort of figure out, or the clinician to figure out, there's also like other things going on here, like attachment theory, which like attachment theory is what most therapists are trained in. Like basically, at least in the US, as far as I know, like everyone learns some attachment theory because it's so central, right? So if you go see like a child and adolescent psychiatrist, for example, they're more likely to have advanced training in attachment theory and things like that. But there's like a lot of benefit from, working with someone who really understands attachment theory. And then the next thing is that, unfortunately, there's no substitute That's terrible handwriting. For a good relationship. So even if we sort of think a little bit about what's going on for people in this situation, like this person is looking for external concordance, right? So it's almost like as a kid, we need concordance. This is how we get emotional mirroring and develop confidence. And then as an adult, if we didn't have this, right, that's still what we're looking for, right? So now we understand, like, okay, why we're blocking people on Twitter. I need concordance, right? You're still looking for someone to like help you understand and like meet you where you're at. So we start to shape our external environment looking for concordance. In the worst cases, sometimes what we'll do is enter like, echo chamber communities where like, since we don't have the confidence in our beliefs to tolerate discussion and differing opinions, what we'll do is just join people who like believe what we believe, right? Because then we're getting that emotional, that concordance. We're getting sort of emotional mirroring from these other people. Like if I believe, that COVID-19 is a hoax or a conspiracy or something like that, which I don't, right? So COVID is not a hoax. Please get vaccinated. But if I believe that sort of thing and like I feel attacked and hurt and bad when people disagree with me, then what I'm going to do is gravitate towards like people who believe the same things I do. And then through finding that emotional mirroring and that concordance, it sort of assuages some of this like internal lack of confidence kind of stuff. So in a weird way, like even as adults, we're trying to do what we didn't get to do in children. And this is where if you look at broadly, like, theories of child development, what tends to happen is like some people get stuck, right? So you're supposed to do this at 1 year, you're supposed to do this at 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20, and 25. And sometimes you'll meet someone who's like developmentally 15, even though they're 25 years old. And that's not really their fault. It's just like they haven't learned how to do that thing yet, right? So sometimes you'll meet adults who throw temper tantrums like a 5-year-old. And like, why do they do that? It's because they never learned like how to, grow past that point. So sometimes you'll have people who are developmentally like behind where they should be. And it's not like just they're globally developmentally behind. I mean, there is a diagnosis for that called global developmental delay. But generally speaking, most human beings, like none of us are, exactly at 20. Some of us will be like developmentally advanced and be like at 25 and be precocious in some ways. We'll be like a little bit developmentally, like a little bit stunted. Right? Like, so like intellectually, math wise, like I'm a 20-year-old who's like, my reading level is like at a 25-year-old's level. Like emotionally, I'm kind of like at a 15-year-old, right? It was totally normal. So, unfortunately, the truth is that, if what you were missing early in life is a good relationship, like sometimes there's just no good substitute for a good relationship. And I've sort of seen this a lot where if you look at people who have had like like very toxic upbringings and stuff like that, strong emotional support from either friends or like aunts or uncles or even a romantic relationship can really help those people like learn how to be like emotionally normal, right? Sort of catch up emotionally. So it's kind of unfortunate, but if you really want to talk about on the grand scope of things, what can you do about it? Like, I think forming healthy relationships is a huge part of like how you get out of this, right? Because let's kind of tunnel down into why is this. So in a healthy relationship, you're going to have disagreements. You're going to make mistakes. And it is so healing. It is so much positivity and XP in terms of emotional development. When you make a mistake and someone says, you made a mistake, I'm acknowledging the mistake, but you're still a good person. Huge, huge, right? When someone says, yeah, you kind of screwed up, and I still like you, and I still care for you, and you're still a good person, and I forgive you. Because what happens until you have that is that your sense of value is determined by mistakes or successes. Right? And this is there's a video in Dr. K's guide called Conditional Love, which is like when the love that you were shown is like dependent on the value as a human being that you were, the way people demonstrated value, or your value as a human being was determined by like whether you made mistakes or you were successful. Very, very common. And so then once your value is not determined by something intrinsic or the true self, but is determined by performance, then you're going to be squarely grounded in the false self. You're going to have a big ego and you're going to lack confidence, right? And then you're going to need to prove how smart you are to everyone all the time, how successful you are to everyone all the time. The last thing that I'd recommend is meditation. So there are some meditations about sort of discovering this true self, right? So like, let me just think about how to share kind of a simple meditative practice. So like this is a practice we haven't done in a while, so we'll just demonstrate it. So what I encourage you to do is go grab a drink, or if you have one in front of you, just like pick it up. So we're going to do something called a tea drinking exercise, okay? So you can do this with any piece of food or beverage or whatever. And so what we're going to do in this practice, it's super simple, is like we're going to just notice who is the person like doing the drinking, right? So think about like who you are. If someone were to ask you like, who are you? What would you answer? You'd probably say something about your profession or your gender or your ethnicity or your name, right? So we can even just pick something as simple as a name. And as we take a sip of tea, we're just going to ask ourselves like, who is doing the drinking? Like, is this person, the name that you describe yourself as, like, is that the person doing the drinking? And in a sense, like sort of, yeah, obviously, right? Because I'm me. But then what I want you to imagine for a moment is imagine that an alien being could observe your consciousness or could implant your body and experience exactly what you experience for just 60 seconds of sipping tea. How would they determine your name from this experience? How would they figure out? Because if this is truly who you are and that's a part of this experience, then an external observer should be able to find your name through drinking tea, right? And so like now we're going to try. So just kind of think a little bit, just observe who is the person who's drinking the tea. Right? So notice the flavor, the temperature, even the scent. The feeling of it as it goes down into your throat, the aftertaste. And now ask yourself, like, who is doing this drinking? Is this a man or a woman? How would you know if this was all you experienced in life? How would you know that this is a man or a woman or someone who's non-binary? Right? For your ethnicity, how would you know that this person is of a particular ethnicity? Right? And as you tunnel down into the experience, you'll start to realize that all of these attributes, whether you're rich or you're poor, or you have a level 39 character in Lost Ark or a level 15 character in Lost Ark, whether you're a man or a woman, all of these attributes, whether you're a father or a son, None of those are actually relevant in this moment, right? Because in that experience of that moment, like that's all the external world. It has nothing to do with the internal experience. And then the question kind of becomes, well, then like, where do we get these identities? Well, we get them from the outside world. And then what the yogis essentially did is they sort of noticed, oh, that's kind of interesting because when I'm drinking tea, I'm a no one. I'm neti neti. And then they were like, well, what happens the moment after I drink tea? Even now as I'm speaking to you, right? As you're listening to this, are you a man or a woman? Neither. Are you rich or are you poor? Neither. If this is all you have, this is the only experience of life you have, is this one slice of consciousness. None of those things are relevant. And then what the yogis sort of figured out, and this is the really hard part, so you can do this if you want to, it's challenging, okay? Is that what is life? Life is a collection of moments. That's all it is. So I'm neti neti here. I'm neti neti here. I'm neti neti here. I'm neti neti here. And then the experience of life is neti neti. That's it. Right? It cannot be described. It cannot, like, if you just think about the experience of tea. Like, we can use words to describe it, but I can use as many words as I want to, but there's no way that you're going to understand the experience of tea until you try it yourself, right? And so if you're stuck in this kind of situation of like being very, very concerned about disagreeing with other people, feeling bad as a person when other people disagree with you, you can absolutely start by, externally limiting stuff, which is very healthy. Don't get me wrong, right? So limiting toxicity in your life is really good. If Twitter is sending you into panic attacks, stay the hell off of Twitter. But the next thing to understand is that remember that we can try to limit our external environment, but there's an internal component as well. And generally speaking, if you want to live a healthy life, like you should limit this external stuff and you should become resilient. What do I mean by resilience? It's the ability to tolerate discordance, right? And generally speaking, resilience comes from confidence. Where does confidence come from? Well, in attachment theory, it comes from emotional mirroring. In the yogic perspective, it comes from a lack of ego. That ego and confidence are at two ends of the spectrum. So as we sort of start to think a little bit about, okay, what is the ego? What is the Ahamkara? It's all of the attributes about your life that are not truly you. So it's anything that you can put on a resume. And that the less we understand who we are, the more we fill up our identity with the attributes from the resume, because we got to put something in there, right? And this is how you end up with people who are like very, very pro-moral cause, right? These are like crusaders. So they're like on a crusade for goodness. And they're like just leaving a wreckage in their wake, right? These are people that are campaigning for something that they very strongly believe in. And if you like talk to them, they're like assholes. Like as human beings, they're just assholes. But it's okay for them because they're doing something externally that's good for the world, right? And so if you're kind of getting triggered by the opinion of others, when people disagree with you, if you start to feel bad, notice that that's an ego component, right? Like you're injecting your identity or your sense of self-worth into a disagreement with another human being, which is like humans are allowed to disagree. Pineapple on pizza, yay, nay. Like that says nothing about you as a person, right? But don't we love to think the opposite? And lastly, when we think a little bit about what to do about it. So the first is that if you're actually having like panic attacks or you're concerned that there's something could be going on that's impairing your function, strongly recommend you go see a therapist. Second thing to understand, and I know that this isn't in everyone's control, but at the end of the day, if you like didn't grow up with a strong father figure who like taught you these sorts of things, that like replacing that relationship in some way or replacing with other kinds of relationships are really good. Like that's it's just, you can't ignore that as a solution. We're not saying it's in your control. We're not saying it's easy, but I would be remiss to say that like, if you've had bad relationships in the past, one way to fix yourself as a person is to have good relationships. Like that's a huge part of it, right? Someone who understands that you can make mistakes and still says they value you as a person. And the last thing is that you can do spiritual stuff, right? There's actually way more that you can do, but today, I'm going to talk about meditation. Because this is the systematic process of discovering the true self, right? So then people were like, oh, by the way, here's how you find it. Questions? That ended up being way longer than I thought it was going to be. But that's Dr. K for you. Can I recap? I just finished the recap. We'll get to some of this stuff in the next one, though. Don't worry. Okay, can I repeat it? Sure. So we just talked about a case where someone was sort of saying, you know, when people disagree with me, like, I feel really bad. So it got to the point where when I saw someone making a comment on Twitter that disagrees with my point of view, it would throw me into a panic attack. So what I did is started blocking people on Twitter. And then I ended up blocking 30K people. And then I got off of Twitter entirely. And that helped some, but I still find myself feeling really bad when people disagree with me. So what's going on there and what do I do about it? So in summary, we have a sense of like confidence on the inside. And the more confident we are, the closer we are to our true self, the more confident we are. And the more confident we are, the more we can tolerate discordance with the outside world. The less confident we are, the more egotistical we are, and confidence and ego are on opposite ends of the spectrum. The more I need the world to get in line with like what I believe, right? So if I'm egotistical and I'm insecure about my appearance, I need everyone to compliment my appearance. And if someone says I'm ugly, I'm going to lash out at them, right? And so what ends up happening is like the reason that these disagreements like cause you personal pain is because your identity is caught up in like some of these non-identity, like non-self related things. So if someone disagrees with you, that makes you feel like you're a bad person or incompetent in some way. And so suddenly what happens is like an external disagreement becomes a indictment of who you are as a person. Right? So if I like Lost Ark, then I'm a bad person. But if you play League of Legends, you're a bad person, right? You see this with Dota and League a lot, where Dota noobs think that everyone who plays LoL is noob. Everyone who plays LoL thinks that Dota people are noobs. Like we make determinations about people based on their preferences. And so that all has to do with like our confidence, right? So as we start to as you start to tunnel down into that, a couple of questions to ask are, you know, if I feel bad, like what does this say about me as a person? If someone disagrees with me, if someone disagrees with me, what does that say about me as a person? Like, and it's kind of weird because technically it doesn't say anything, but that's not how your mind thinks, right? Your mind feels incompetent if someone disagrees with you. It's like, you're an idiot. That's what your mind is going to be telling you. And that's why you feel bad. So how do you fix that kind of thing? Well, the first thing is to understand that you know, if you are getting panic attacks and things like that, like go see a professional. Second thing is to understand that a lot of this comes from a lack of like healthy relationships growing up. And so healthy relationships is one way to fix it. Now, I understand that that's kind of difficult for some people because you can't fix that on your own. But the truth of the matter is that sometimes in life, like you can't fix everything on your own, right? It doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can do internally. But I've seen a lot of value or yield from having healthy relationships to repair things that unhealthy relationships have damaged, right? So if you've been in an abusive romantic relationship, being in a loving romantic relationship is a great way to fix a lot of that crap. Probably the most efficient way, to be honest. The last thing is that you can do personally introspective stuff. So today we talked about meditation, but there are all kinds of other things you can do, right? You can read about Stoic philosophy. You can go for long hikes. You can climb to the top of a mountain. Those are all things that I, in a weird way, consider spiritual activities. Not to say that they're spiritual by definition, but they get a lot of the benefits that systematic spiritual practice will get. So if you're not into spirituality, that's fine. Go and explore, right? Like go and test yourself. Go explore the world. Go, you know, try to climb a mountain and like struggle to get to the top and feel amazing about yourself. Those are all ways to build confidence. But the meditation we talked about was about the nature of self. Right? And to like drink tea for a moment and think a little bit about, you know, what is it who is doing the drinking, right? Like is this person a man, a woman, non-binary? Is it, you know, someone who's old, young, rich, poor? And then in that moment of experience, it's actually none, right? It's just someone drinking tea. And the more that you pay attention to your life, like on a global scale, moment to moment, you'll realize that's all you are. Just someone drinking tea. Now I'm someone playing Lost Ark. Now I'm someone who's streaming. You know, I'm someone who has their hands up. Like I can just feel my hands up. Like that's what I am. That's all I am in that moment, right? So I'm not smart or dumb. I'm not rich or poor. I'm not good or bad. I'm not a cult leader or a messiah. You know, like I'm none of those things, right? I'm just me. So I hope that's a good summary. Okay. We've got other things. All right. Okay, so kind of related to this, for those of y'all that are coming a little bit late, I think that's actually okay, because we're going to be talking a lot about ego and resilience and stuff today. So let's take a look. Número dos. Can you really change who you are? Okay. I've been doing a lot of introspection this year, and Dr. K really helped kickstart that for me, and I feel like I'm finally waking up to who I have been. I feel like I've been dishonest with everyone in my life because I've always played whatever character I think best fits the situation instead of being my authentic self. Even with respect to my own self-image, I thought of myself as a really good person, yet I've treated women with no respect and ruined all the relationships I've been in by never telling them how I really feel about things. I guess what I want to know is, if I do keep working hard to better myself in these fundamental ways, how do I get over the disgust I feel towards myself? I feel like I want to move to a new town by myself and just stay by myself like a time chamber until I feel ready to come out. Maybe time is all that's needed. I'm just feeling really down tonight. I love you guys. Thank you. So this, unfortunately, is a really common problem, right? So sometimes we're on a journey of self-growth. And as we start to introspect, as we start to dig into who we are, as we start to think critically about ourselves, what we find is something that's not very pleasant, right? We start to realize, okay, now that I'm really looking at myself for like the first time, I'm realizing like, holy crap, I've been quite dishonest. And even though like in some ways, like I think of myself as a good person, what I realize is that I haven't been very authentic. I've treated people with disrespect. I've messed up relationships. And sometimes we also feel like disgusted by ourselves, right? We're like, holy crap, I had no idea that it's actually like, this is bad, right? Like how do I overcome that? How do I like overcome the disgust? And then I can understand this as well, because sometimes what we want to do is like, we want to go into a cocoon, right? We want to disappear. We want to move across country. And like, we realize that we're so screwed up that we need to like go somewhere to a different location, enter this hibernation chamber of self-work, and come out on the other side like a new human being. This is something I understand all too well, because it's exactly why I went to India. I was like, man, I suck at life. I need to like go and transform myself into a good human being. And I even went like halfway across the world, and like went to a new place and studied with monks in my journey. That was my time chamber. So it's something I really understand. So this is something that happens a lot, right? As we start to walk the journey of self-growth, we discover things that are kind of sus. And as we discover those things, we really want to fix them, and we can feel like, disgusted with ourselves. So what do we do about this? Okay? So can you really change who you are? It's a great question. So that's where I'm going to start with, a couple of simple points. So when we say like, can you change who you are? The first question is like, who are you, right? How do you determine like who you are? So sure, we talked a little bit about the true self and stuff like that, but we'll take a step back from that for a second. So like, if you're disgusted with yourself and you like want to be a good person, right? Because you sometimes used to think of yourself as a good person, then you discovered all this crap that you're doing, which you never realized. Does that make you a bad person? So I think the first question to ask yourself is like, what makes a good person and what makes a bad person? Right? So like, just think about that, because if your goal is to be a good person and we want to change who I am, right? That's the goal. Let's start by defining like what makes a good person. It's kind of interesting. So this is why a lot of people struggle to become good people, because if you start to ask like what makes a good person, like, I don't know, right? So some people may say, okay, like what makes a good person is like doing good things. So that's kind of interesting, right? So it's like, so if I do good things, does that make me a good person? Not really, right? Because we sort of say that good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things. So we still sort of have this idea of a good person and a bad person. So if we kind of look at it a little bit more, we can say, well, on balance, if I, help more than I hurt, then I'm a good person, which I still don't know if I entirely agree with that. It sort of makes sense. So let's say I'm a surgeon and I've, saved 99 people's lives, and I'm drunk driving one day and there's a tragic accident, and, the people, I run into another car and someone passes away. Am I a good person then? Like, because I've saved 99 people's lives and maybe I've taken 2 or 3, and does that make me a good person or a bad person? So the first thing to kind of as you kind of dig into this, you may come up with your own answers. Sort of, I lean heavily on, once again, Eastern perspectives, which I'm about to share. So this is the way that I see it, okay? This is the model that I use. So the first is that, as we sort of talked about already, there's a true self and there's a false self, and that people are neither good nor bad. You just are, right? There's you just are. That fundamentally human beings all have intrinsic value. It's not based on your actions or anything like that. All human beings have some sense of value. In the Eastern perspective, there's also this idea of the true self, right? Which is neti neti, which is not anything that can be described. Who you truly are is not good or bad, is not smart or dumb, is not rich or poor, is not professionally successful or professionally unsuccessful, is not level 60 in Lost Ark, not level 20 in Lost Ark, whatever. So we can fill it up with ego, and ego can assign us to be good or bad, but at the core of the day, the humanness within you is sort of fixed and neutral and, generally speaking, positive, okay? So then the question becomes, well, what about actions, right? So can you really change who you are, and what about actions? And this is where I like the theory of karma. So the theory of karma sort of says that, you can take actions, and actions have consequences, and we as human beings tend to assign value to actions. So there's another really interesting thing about the theory of karma is that a lot of people think that so we're going to talk about karma for a second. So a lot of people think that good karmas cancel out bad karmas, right? So I'm going to tell you all a quick joke. So 3 mathematicians go to an archery range. And so the first one shoots an arrow, right? And it goes 10 feet to the left of the target. He's like, damn it. And the second one shoots an arrow and goes 10 feet to the right of the target. And the third one jumps up and says, we hit it, right? That's what we think of. We think of life as a balance. But the truth is that averaging stuff isn't actually how life works. So in the case of the surgeon, so you can do 99 good deeds, and it doesn't allow you to get away with one bad deed, right? Each thing has its own consequence. The other way to think about it is that, if I throw a ball up in the air, that ball is going to come down. If I throw a ball down towards the floor and it bounces off the floor, it's going to come up. It's not like throwing one ball up in the air and throwing the other ball down at the air at the same time, that both balls stay the same, right? Each action that we take has its own consequences. And so you can make a determination, and you can decide for yourself, and you can say, okay, what's the ratio of good actions to bad actions that makes you a good person? I actually don't think that exists. I think it's apples and oranges, that you can't be a good person, right? The only things that you can do good deeds and you can do bad deeds, but you as a person are relatively fixed. Now, we can absolutely, from a practical societal perspective, say that, this is a bad person. But this is something that I've come to understand a lot, working in addiction psychiatry, is that oftentimes when someone is addicted to a substance, they feel like bad people, and they're told by their family members that they're bad people, and sort of because they've done a lot of bad crap, right? They've hit people while drunk driving. They've ruined marriages. They've been toxic to their children. And so they naturally feel really bad about themselves. And are those bad actions? Absolutely. Should you take responsibility and accountability for your actions? Absolutely. And helping that person get better, helping that person start to be in a place where they can make the world a better place, starts by some amount of fundamental understanding that you are neither a good person or a bad person. Have you done bad things? Absolutely. Should you pay for those? Absolutely. And that doesn't doom you to being a bad person, right? Ultimately, if you're saying that bad actions make you a bad person, then by definition, you should be able to do good actions to make you a good person. I don't really buy into that, right? Because I'm saying that who you are and what you do are independent. Practically, we make some judgments in the real world, right? Which is okay. But at the core of the thing, if you're asking, can you really change? In a sense, I don't think so. What you can change is your actions. But as a human being, you can't change. Now, the caveat there is that I probably don't agree with any kind of negative judgment that you have about yourself, right? Because you are just what you are. You are neither good nor bad, but you can absolutely change your actions. So the next thing that I kind of want to point out, actually one more point here, which is that once we make an identity determination about ourselves, that influences what we believe we're capable of, right? So if I view myself as a loser, I won't actually act in a way that improves my life. So like if I'm a loser, I'm not going to apply for a promotion because I'm a loser. If I'm attracted to someone, I'm not going to ask them out because I'm a loser. So what happens is this sense of identity about I'm a bad person starts to shape our life and become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's why I really like the yogic perspective, because it seems like it's helped a ton of people. Because like you are neither good nor bad, you are just you. It's your actions that can be good or bad. And so if you want to transform your life, don't worry about transforming your identity, just transform your actions, right? Because that's like ultimately what's important. Like you can be a bad person, even if you believe you're a bad person. If you're a surgeon who saves 99 lives and then you have a drunk driving accident and then you spend some time in jail or whatever is the appropriate accountability, then you get out of jail and you dedicate your life to saving 1,000 more people, I think that's fantastic. Is it unfortunate that you had that negative karma? Absolutely. Should you take responsibility for it? Absolutely. And that one event does not determine anything about the rest of your life, right? You can choose to act in a positive way after that point. So now, this person has more than just this question, right? So can you really change? I think in a sense, no, because you are what you are. But if you think what you are is bad, then I disagree. It's kind of weird answer, okay? But there's a subtle point here. So I guess what I want to know is if I keep working hard on myself in these fundamental ways, how do I get over the disgust I feel towards myself? This is tricky. Very, very tricky. So you can't get over the disgust you feel towards yourself. Kind of a weird thing to say, right? So I want y'all to think about this for a second. Really pay attention. The desire, where does the desire to get over the disgust you have within yourself come from? Do y'all understand that question? Right? So, I want to get over my self-disgust. Right? What is the energy that is driving this goal? It is disgust. Right? I'm disgusted with myself. That's why I need to get over it. The desire to get over your own disgust is coming from disgust. Y'all see that? It's crazy. It's like this part of me is revolting, so I need to get rid of it. Which the part of you that thinks that that's revolting is in and of itself revolted by it. So you can't get over it. In fact, this is why people get stuck, right? Because anyone who wants to change that, like, listen to his language. How do I change who I am? Do you guys get that this question can only be asked if you have a fundamental disgust for yourself? Why do you need to change? Well, because I'm a sticky, ugly person on the inside. So even as you try to improve, what you're actually doing is reinforcing that disgust. Do y'all get that? Like, you can't want to change. The more you want to change, the more you don't accept yourself, the more disgusted you are with yourself, right? It's kind of really wild, but this energy, so accomplishing this goal, and this is why people get stuck, right? This is why they get stuck, because the more that you do this, the more that you're actually giving into that sense of disgust. You're feeding it, right? It's interesting. So be careful about that. So the question is, okay, like, what do you do about it, right? So do we get over it? No. But are we going to leave it there? Absolutely not, right? So we can move forward, but we don't want to get over it. This is where we need to accept it. The solution is not getting over, right? Because getting over implies I am bad and I need to transform into I am good. This is good. This is change who I am. This is the goal. Oh, whoop, sorry. Whoa, my God. Sorry about that. Okay, so I want to get over my self-disgust. right? This is coming from disgust. This is the key thing. So the solution is acceptance. And so I am bad, I'm good. This is what you want to accomplish, right? So you want to change who I am. But this over here is, so this process is a lack of acceptance. Do y'all see that? It's not accepting this at all. In fact, it's doing the exact opposite. It's saying that I'm disgusted with myself. I need to change. I don't want to accept myself at all. Like, this needs to be different. So interestingly enough, and even if we do that, what we're going to be doing, the more that we try to overcome our disgust, the more that we're feeding and giving into our lack of acceptance of ourselves. Okay? So then the question is, how do you accept? What does that look like? So this is where you can say to yourself, you know, I thought of myself as a really good person, yet I've treated women with no respect and ruined all relationships. Okay, so that's what this person believes. So what do you say? Well, what you say is like, yeah, so I've made a lot of mistakes, right? I used to think of myself as a good person. I've realized that I've done a lot of bad things. I'm not really sure if I'm a good person or a bad person, and that's okay. I'm working on it, right? So I may have screwed up a lot of things. I may have treated people with disrespect, but today I can do better. I can treat people differently. And it comes down to karma, right? It comes down to actions. I can change the actions that I take. I have no idea on a cosmic sense whether I'm a good person or a bad person. I certainly don't judge that about myself. I don't know who has the capacity to judge whether I'm a good person or a bad person. But so be it. This is like my journey. I'm not perfect. I may even be a bad person. Okay. But today, I can try to do different. I can try to act differently, right? I can like choose to treat women with respect. I can choose to try to be nicer to other people. I can make choices to like not necessarily change the person that I am, but like I can change what I do on a day-to-day basis, even if I'm a bad person. So oddly enough, like that's what acceptance looks like. It's acknowledging, okay, this is okay. It's true. It's fine, right? So be it. Would it be better if things were different? Sure. Absolutely. But it is what it is, right? So maybe I'm not a good person. I used to think of myself as a really good person. Now I'm not so sure. So be it. I'm not going to try to change that. Today, I'm going to just act. I'm going to act in a better way. So even if I'm a bad person, can a bad person do good things? Absolutely. Can a good person do bad things? Absolutely. Right? So it comes down to action. It comes down to like accepting that maybe you have some parts of yourself that are not good. You and everyone else. Right? And if you try to overcome your disgust with yourself, that in and of itself is being fueled by your disgust. So you're just going to feed the problem. And this is exactly why it's so hard to change yourself. Right? Because the way that you change yourself, ironically, is not through trying to change yourself. It's through accepting yourself. That's where change begins. So you see this like in mind-blowing simplicity with like Alcoholics Anonymous. How do you get sober? By admitting you're an alcoholic. Right? You'll start with like, and I'm not 100%, you know, there's a lot of things that I'm not super happy with in terms of AA and how they run. But if you look at it, it's a very effective intervention for a ton of people. I don't agree with 100% of their philosophy. But they got a couple of really important things right. And that's paradoxically, you know, the way that you become sober is by accepting that you're an alcoholic. Right? And they start every single statement. Anytime someone gets up there and speaks, it's, hi, my name is Alok, I'm an alcoholic. And they own it, right? And once you own it, once you're like, you're not saying, I'm no longer an alcoholic, woohoo. No one says that, right? It's a lifelong thing for them. And it's through that power of acceptance that they actually gain the fortitude and strength to gain sobriety. And so in a bizarre way, like own it. Like if you're not a great person, so be it. You don't have to beat yourself up over it. You can accept it and you can change. So this is the other thing about acceptance is a lot of people think that acceptance means giving up. Oh, I screwed up. No, it doesn't mean giving up. In fact, it means the opposite. It means accepting where you are and wanting to move forward. So if I like fail a test, there are two ways I can accept that, right? One is I can accept it and then throw my hands up. And the other way is I failed the test. I need to study harder. Right? So acceptance doesn't mean stopping any kind of forward momentum. In fact, in my life, most of the forward progress I've made is through acceptance of my faults. and saying like, I can take action, right? I can take positive karma. I can work on this. So don't get over your disgust. Just accept it. Say there's a part of myself that is really, really disgusted with my actions. That's really interesting. Like that is hurtful, right? Like there's a part of myself that's like very, very upset with me, that loathes who I am. But it doesn't have to be the whole you. It's not the whole you, by the way, right? You can accept that. You can say, okay, so like I'm going to try to do better. So I don't know if I'm a good person. I don't know if I'm a bad person, but on this particular day, I can take an action that is in the right direction. Last thing to talk about is the time capsule, right? So sometimes when we're in this situation where we're disgusted with ourselves, we just want to retreat from the world, go to a place, enter a cocoon, and come out a fixed human being. And this is where, like I said, it's something that I understand all too well because it's exactly what I did when I first went to India, right? Like, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to this thing, I'm going to transform myself, and then I'm going to come back to the world. Because we view transformation of the self as like separate from the rest of our lives. Whereas the big lesson I learned in India is like, I don't have to be in India to become a monk. In fact, running away to India was just running away from my problems in a subtle way for my ego to like outperform people who were outperforming me. So when someone, when my friends and stuff like got 4.0 GPAs and got into medical school and I failed to get into medical school for the second time in a row, I was like, okay, well, let me go become a monk because then I'm above all of this rat race, all these doctors who are chasing money. I'm better than all of them. I'm not materialistic, et cetera, et cetera. It's all running away from my problems. And then I realized through thankfully a lot of brilliant teachers and some, effort on my own part that I'm going to take my problems with me wherever I go. They're my problems. Running away to India, like I'm going to take them with me. So you can move to a new town, but like your sense of disgust where is it coming from? Like, where does it live? It lives up here. It's going to come with you, right? So there are absolutely reasons to move for sure. Like that can be very important. Like by all means move. So if your toxicity is coming from your external environment, right? By all means move. Even getting a fresh start, like mentally can be a good idea. I'm not saying don't move. Just be prepared, right? And I don't think that personal growth can be done. You can work on it like very intentionally, right? You can go to a monastery for a few months. By all means, like go for it. It's a wonderful experience. But like don't assume that just moving somewhere and like working on yourself is like separate from the rest of your life. Like should you dedicate some amount of time to it? Absolutely. But generally speaking, it's going to, your attitude towards yourself is going to come with you. So a lot of times we want to change the person that we are, right? If we think, oh, I used to think I'm a good person. And now I started the journey of introspection and self-reflection, which is fantastic. And as we start to look critically at ourselves, we see a lot of nasty stuff that our mind had been suppressing or ignoring or cognitive biases or whatever. And then as a result, we want to overcome those things, right? We want to transform ourselves into a good person. The unfortunate tricky thing is that oftentimes the self-loathing is what drives the desire to be better. And giving into that self-loathing is actually going to sort of, in a weird way, like propagate the problem. Because I'm going to overcome the disgust that I hold towards myself by giving into the disgust that I hold towards myself, right? And so that's like not a way to fix it. So what's the answer? Acceptance. What the hell does that mean? It means sort of acknowledging for a moment that like it's okay that you screwed up, right? You did screw up. And this is the other thing is we have this idea that if we transform into a good person, then we'll suddenly stop screwing up. That's dangerous. Very dangerous, right? So we see this a lot in terms of people who are like, have accomplished a lot of good things and then get off track. This is like when they, you do a lot of good work and now that I'm a good person, like once you sort of had that identity, you can start making excuses for yourself and getting away with doing bad things. So we don't want to do that, right? Understand that you can't be a good person or a bad person. You're just you. And like whether you have a positive impact on the world or a negative impact on the world has to do with your actions. So how are you going to live today? It's okay that you screwed up in the past. If you treated women with disrespect, I'm not going to say no big deal, but so be it, right? And do better today. Make sense? Questions? Okay, question about the true self. Am I what I experience, or am I the thing that experiences? What's the true self there? Say I experience happiness. Am I that happiness, or am I the consciousness that experiences that happiness? Excellent question. Kind of a tricky answer. So the first thing that I'd say is that you are that which experiences. So that's the classic conclusion that yogis came to, is that you are the experiencer and you are not actually any of the experiences. So, when I drink the tea, I am that which tastes the tea. I am not the tea. That being said, there's an interesting caveat, because if you look at dhyan, so there are different states of consciousness, okay? So it's kind of weird. So generally speaking, we're the experiencer. But there are some states of consciousness in which the object of observation and the observer become one. When you become one with the tea, okay? And even when I work with people in performance stuff, there's times where if you look at if you talk to esports professionals, there are moments where they transcend human limitations and they become one with the game. And then you become some sort of bizarre, you're channeling some sort of god of the game. And that's when you really reach peak performance. So there's some elements of consciousness, states of consciousness, right? So this is more theoretical, esoteric, spiritual stuff. It's not really scientifically, there's some evidence of flow states and stuff like that. So I think we're starting to chip away at that. But what I'm talking about really is not scientifically validated. Flow state is the closest thing that we can get to in terms of science. But where you become one with the object of your doing. So in the flow state is a really good example of scientifically that, right? You become one with the writing. You lose yourself and you are just one with the writing. You're one with the creation of art. Optimal performance sort of touches on this, which the yogis call sort of like dhyan. But I think those states are actually slightly different. And then there are even some mantras that supposedly if you meditate on, chant, etc., will cultivate oneness with the external thing. So Aham Brahmasmi is a good example of that, where Aham Brahmasmi means I am the universe. And so it's kind of weird, if you just chant that, do you become one with the universe? No, because chanting is on some level intellectual. But when you do mantra practice, there's more than intellectual activity going on. There's a lot of detail about that in Dr. K's guide. So there's theoretically some of these esoteric spiritual practices, like chanting Aham Brahmasmi, which will bridge the gap between this person and the external world. And at that point, you may be the happiness. But generally speaking, I tend to think of you as the experiencer as opposed to the experience. Does accepting to be a bad person not reinforce the own view identity to be a bad person? Sort of. So it depends on how you accept it. So that when we're talking about acceptance, you can't accept something from the future, right? You can't do that. You can only accept what is in the present and what has happened in the past. So just because you accept, so there are two ways to, in a sense, accept things, but I wouldn't even call one of them acceptance. So when your Ahamkara, when your past actions form your Ahamkara, that goes into the future. That is the determination that I am a bad person. But when we talk about acceptance, we're not talking about, because remember, that's not who you are. You're neither good nor bad. The true self is neither good nor bad. What you're accepting is that you've made mistakes, right? That's real acceptance. I've screwed up. I'm really not in the best place. I really haven't used my time wisely. And I can change that, right? And going forward, it doesn't have to be that way. These are actions I've taken in the past. These are individual conversations that I've had with women where I have not treated them with respect. In the next conversation that I have with a woman, I have a choice. I can treat them with respect or I can not treat them with respect. And that's the whole problem. That's where and now we'll get to this in a second. Even our next question talks about this. Is that once it becomes an issue of ego, then you're screwed. But if it becomes an issue of action, then you'll find salvation, right? There's a road forward. So when you accept, I wouldn't accept that you're a bad person because I don't think you're a bad person. Even someone who has done bad things doesn't necessarily make them a bad person. I don't believe I have the capacity to judge someone as a bad person or a good person. My mind may do it when I get upset or frustrated or whatever. Like, that's a real Karen. You know, we want to do that. Our mind loves to judge other people. But like, who made me divine that I can judge another human being? Can I judge their actions? Like, absolutely. And this is what I've seen working with people who have addictions. Like, there are people out there who've done some really bad stuff who can actually end up being like pretty decent human beings. And it's just about accepting that you have screwed up and that you can change, right? And once you own that you've screwed up, the interesting thing is it's empowering. Like, it's empowering because that means you're responsible. And if you are responsible, if you accept that responsibility, that also means you have the power to change it. Good questions. Why do I feel motivated at night only? We actually have a video about that on YouTube. We streamed it, but now it lives on YouTube. Okay, one more question. One more thing we're going to do, okay? This is the one I'm in some ways the most excited about. Got to drink something, chat. Okay, this is super cool. So part of what I love about HealthyGamer is that it's not just about Dr. K, right? So like, I'm not the only source of wisdom or knowledge. In fact, I'm one out of the, I guess 44,000 people on subreddit, 70,000 people on Discord, a couple 100,000 people in our community. And each and every one of you can absolutely make contributions and like be a part of the AoE healing, right? And so what I really love about this post is that this person has done that very beautifully. So this is my approach to problems before and after HealthyGamer. So problem appears, I rationalize it, and then a couple of things happen. Either I solve the problem in my mind, and then before, cool, I'm gifted, right? I figured it out, I'm so smart. Or the problem remains unsolved, and then I try to like work through it again, and that happens 2 or 3 times. And then if I can't figure it out, wow, I'm a piece of crap. And then after HealthyGamer, problem appears, rationalize. Okay, let's think through it. Problem solved, nice. Problem unsolved, trial and error. And then if the problem remains unsolved, we're gonna try that a few more times. We're gonna try it again and again and again. If we solve it somewhere in there, nice. If we don't solve it, we're gonna try again, we're gonna try again, try again. And if that happens about 10 times, then we're gonna deal with the frustration. So I really love this graphic because I think it captures a lot of important points. So the first thing that I want to talk a little bit about, so if you like look at this graphic and you ask yourself like, what's the most important thing in the after, right? What was missing in the before that we now see in the after? And I think what the first thing that people are going to come up with is trial and error, right? That's completely missing from this before and after. But I actually think there's another really, really important thing that's very, very subtle. The first thing that people notice is that we've added trial and error. And this is fantastic. So let's talk about that for a second. There's a wonderful psychologist named Carol Dweck. And what Carol Dweck sort of discovered is that there are 2 kinds of mindsets. There's a growth-oriented mindset and there's a performance-oriented mindset. And what she noticed is that people who have a performance-oriented mindset are focused on outcomes. So they want to get a 4.0, they want to get an A on the test. They're not actually interested in learning, they're interested in performance. So they want to be number 1 on the class. They don't want to do a good job, they want to get paid the most money. They don't want to learn the material, they want to get an A on the test. And so what she also discovered is that there's a different kind of mindset, which is a growth-oriented mindset. And people with the growth-oriented mindset are more interested in learning and growing than they are in a particular piece of it, like a particular outcome. And generally speaking, what she advocates for and what she finds is that people who have a growth-oriented mindset tend to do better, be happier, more growth-oriented, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where I want to talk about trial and error for a second. So in the growth-oriented mindset, error is not a problem, right? Because it's like, this is where, if we kind of think about it, failure can be interpreted in one of 2 ways. It can be viewed as incompetence or inexperience, right? So if I play a game of Dota and I do poorly, is that because I'm a bad gamer or because it's my first game of Dota and I'm inexperienced at it? So even with a shared outcome, depending on how your mindset is, you can interpret it in two different ways. And the interesting thing, the really important thing there is that depending on my interpretation, it will actually drastically change what comes next. So if I conclude that I'm a bad gamer, or wow, I'm crap, then it does not encourage me to try again, right? In fact, it does the opposite, where like we don't want to try again. We actually want to give up. If I acknowledge that this is a trial and error problem and I'm inexperienced, then I automatically have a road forward. So it actually increases my motivation versus tanks my motivation. If I have a growth-oriented mindset and I consider this a problem of inexperience. Because all that means is I just need to play more Dota and like I'll learn, right? I'll develop experience over time. Totally cool. So that's the first thing to kind of think a little bit about in terms of like growth-oriented mindset, performance-oriented mindset. And as I'm happy to hear that before they came to us and after they came to us, they've started to focus on trial and error and acknowledge that like, you know, it's not about how gifted you are. It's about how much you try, how many times you play the game, the effort that you put forward, because this variable is controllable. This variable is not. This variable is not. These are fixed, right? So that's really huge. So the next thing that I want to kind of point out, or actually before we do that, so let's talk a little bit about the Eastern stuff, because the yogis sort of understood this principle too, that Carol Dweck arguably, I wouldn't say rediscovered, but I think she touched on it in a different way, explained it in a different way. It's not entirely the same, but I think that there's some shared wisdom here. So this is where, like, if you look at, you know, ancient meditation stuff, there's this concept of Karmaphala. And this is where, you know, as a human being, you control your actions, not the outcomes of your actions. So what you should focus on is action. So karma means action, farta means fruit. So as a human being, you are entitled to your actions, your choices, your behaviors. You are not entitled to the outcomes of your actions. So I, as a human being, am entitled to ask someone out, right? That's something I can do. It's an action I can take. I'm not entitled to that person saying yes. So as a human being, I'm entitled to apply for a job, but I'm not entitled to get the job. So as a human being, all I control in life is what I do, not what happens. So I can roll the dice, but I don't get to control what happens, right? I don't get to control whether it's a 1, a 2, a 3, 4, 5, or 6, whatever. So this is kind of interesting because a lot of times, if you really think about it, like a lot of our suffering comes from expectations about the outcomes of our actions, right? I like this person so much, I care about them so much, I got them flowers 15 times, and now I'm asking them out and they're saying no. It's my entitlement to the outcome that actually causes my suffering. So what's the second thing? So that I think is also aligned with a growth mindset, by the way, because growth mindset is about actions, right? It's about trial and error. And as you adopt the principle of Karmaphala in your life, you're going to focus on actions. Next thing is, what's the difference between these two? Trying to get down. So what's the difference between these two statements and these two statements? What's different between these and these? What word do y'all see in both of these? So some people are saying things like detachment. Very good. Identity. Here comes the Ahamkara again. Right? So now we see that this is Ahamkara oriented. This has to do with I. This is a determination of identity. These are simply experiences. Deal with that frustration. This is an emotion. This is an action. Nice. This is an appreciation. Good job. It has nothing to do with I am a good person. I am a bad person. So this is the other thing that Karmaphala does. This is why we advocate for moving away from Ahamkara identity. So generally speaking, what tends to happen is as we go through life, if we're not careful, we start formulating opinions about who we are as people. And it can be a good opinion too, right? So a positive opinion or a negative opinion about yourself are both going to be equally damaging. It's all Ahamkara. So I can think, and you can think about this, right? There are people who are full of themselves. They have all kinds of positive opinions. Like, that's not actually healthy. It doesn't lead to healthy relationships. It doesn't even lead to good outcomes. Right? So when you start to add Ahamkara into the situation, this is going to demolish your motivation. Because then what happens is like because if you're gifted, then things should be easy. And if things aren't easy, then I'm going to retreat from it, right? Or I'm no longer gifted. Oh, crap. This is how intelligence leads to avoidance. One of our earliest videos that resonated with a lot of people. Or if I'm smart, and that becomes my identity, I'm a smart kid. What happens when I have difficulty with something? So I've got two options. When I have difficulty with something and I engage in it, that means I'm not smart anymore because it should be easy for me, right? Because things are easy for smart kids. So like if I engage in something that's hard, it costs my identity. It threatens my identity. It threatens my intelligence. And that's why you have tons of people discussing quantum mechanics and being experts on the internet instead of pursuing PhDs. Because if you actually pursue a PhD, then things are hard. And if it's hard, then maybe you're not so smart. Or maybe there are people in the program who are smarter than you. And that's terrifying because all your identity is I'm a gifted kid. I'm so smart. And so in order to steer clear of all that crap, we avoid things in life. And so if you're a smart kid, you don't do things that are challenging. And then as you get older, like the number of things that you can do are easy become fewer and fewer and fewer. And then eventually you get stuck to where you can't do anything because everything is hard at this point. And so all you have left at that point is the fact that you're a smart kid because you didn't do that thing and you didn't do that thing and you didn't do that thing. So instead of diffusing your identity through different things, all you have left is that you're smart. And then you're kind of screwed. There's a whole video that explains that from one of our earliest things for back when we were in person. So anyway, I gave a lecture about that. You can check it out on YouTube. And the flip side of that is also I'm crap. And this is important to understand because once you make a determination that you're crap, that is going to influence your motivation. Because if you are crap, what's the use in trying? Why bother? It's not going to work anyway. Someone else will do a better job. And so you don't take action once you have an identity determination that you are crap. And that's because we have this part of our brain that makes calculations, and part of the calculation is the likelihood of success. And the higher the likelihood of success is, the more likely we are to take that action. That's like very basic human motivational stuff, okay? You guys can check out the Barch and Dowd paper that we've referenced several times. But the tricky thing is that if you conclude that you're crap, that lowers your likelihood of success. If your likelihood of success is very low, then your ability to take action is hampered because if you're crap, it's not going to work anyway, so why bother? And then you get stuck. The point is, even if you have a good ego or a bad ego, they both result in you being stuck, right? And this is also sort of related to that Karmaphala thing because how do you get from here to here? So this is where Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, so this is a sort of a religious reference here, but I think the principle transcends religion. You're allowed to disagree with it. I'm not saying it's objectively correct, right? So it's sort of the way he explains it is that like once you let go of the outcome, the ego is going to go with it. Because think about outcomes are what determine ego, right? I'm the smartest kid in the class. That's based on an outcome. I'm the prettiest person in the class. That's based on an outcome. I'm homecoming queen. I got promoted. I'm the youngest person in the company to get to vice president. All ego, all outcome related. Has nothing to do with actions. So what Krishna sort of says is that the way to go from here to here is to become action oriented. You don't have to believe in Krishna. You don't have to believe in Hinduism or anything like that. Just evaluate the principle on its own 2 feet and you determine whether it's correct or incorrect. But the more that we focus on action, the more that we move away from ego. The more that we move away from ego, the less trapped we become. Less trapped we become, the more motivated we become. And this is how you go from just sitting here, because look at this person, is just thinking, right? There's no effort. There's no action. Rationalize, problem solve. Rationalize, try again, thinking, wow, I'm crap, cool, I'm gifted, end of story. What is this person doing? Acting. Try once, try again. Try 3rd time, 4th time, 5th time, 6th time, 7th time, 8th time, 9th time, 10th time. Wow, this is really frustrating. But chances are, in those 10 trials, you'll actually fix the problem and then you can appreciate, right? It's not about ego. This is appreciation. This is gratitude. And so how do you start to accept? How do you develop gratitude? How do you let go of ego? All in this diagram. Right? So I don't know exactly what this person learned, but the way they put together the diagram implies it's the essence, it's the juice from our teachings, right? It's the juice of what we try to explain. Beautifully put together. Because it incorporates, like, I don't know that this person was like, oh, these statements are egotistical. Let me change that. I think that this person actually started to view their lives in a different way, right? They started to step away from ego and focus on action. And now suddenly, like, they're trying things, they're growing, they're like attempting, they're motivated, they're acting. And that's exactly what we want to see. And I love this diagram because it really boils down to the essence of what we try to teach. So if y'all are sort of in this situation, be careful about ego, right? Be careful about just focusing on intellect. Be careful about a performance or outcome-oriented mindset, right? Because that's the fard. The outcome is the fard. That's what we sort of talk about. The fruit of action that Krishna is talking about is the performance that Carol Dweck is talking about. And as you move away from that, start to view yourself as inexperienced as opposed to I'm crap or I'm incompetent. I'm inexperienced. This can be fixed. Take actions. As those emotions come up, acknowledge them. It's okay to be frustrated, right? Like, you've tried this 10 times. And even if you fix the problem, if the problem is solved, be careful about your ego. Express gratitude and appreciation instead of saying you're the hottest shit on the earth. That make sense? Okay. So I think that's what we've got for today. We talked about meditation a little bit earlier for the first segment, so if you guys missed that, you can catch the VOD. We're going to have to bounce because I'm teaching later today and I got to prep for that. But I hope that was really helpful. Strongly recommend if you guys came in late, you can watch like the whole stream because it's sort of all related topics to ego and identity, which is something that I think people have been increasingly interested in recently. So like, how do I overcome ego? How do I develop a healthy identity? Like, who am I truly? And so the cool thing about that is that, like, as we explore identity and ego, like, there's a lot of this old, weird, ancient, esoteric Eastern stuff, which we can learn from. And there's like a lot of scientific stuff, which we can learn from. And then there's also like some good old fashioned, tried and true, practical sort of advice, understanding thought, and what's going on in your head kind of stuff mingled in. And the cool thing is that you don't have to subscribe to any one part of this, right? So like when we teach here at HG, it's not about agreeing with what I say. I'm by no means the arbiter of truth, right? I'm very far away from that. So my job is to present you with options to consider. So here are the different ways you can think about it. What works for you? What doesn't work for you? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? So a lot of the attitude that we take at HG, and this is why I really love this diagram, right? Because this is not, I did not make this diagram. I could not make this diagram. This is a diagram that is born of someone listening to what we say, evaluating it for themselves, trying to implement it in their own life, and coming to their own conclusions. Okay? And that's what I want y'all to do. So the way that my teachers taught me the way that my teachers taught me was not as the arbiter of truth. They didn't say, this is the truth, you have to believe it. They gave me options to explore. And what I want y'all to do is like explore these very authentically, be critical of them, right? See what works for you and what doesn't. Thank God for Control Z. Oh my goodness. Right? Okay. Good luck. I saw someone ask if we can raid Pokey today. Sure. Why not? We meditated actually halfway through the stream today. So we can raid Pokey. Is Pokey streaming? Let's just make sure she's live. Yes, she is. Okay. On the Valentine's Day stream, we had a question about, or there was someone who was posting on relationship advice about someone who called a Twitch streamer their queen. I was so curious what ends up happening there. I'm so curious about that. Like, I don't even know what that means exactly. I'm hoping it was just a meme. But let's send Pokey some TLC, and we'll see y'all on Friday. Take care.